What's up, guys? Thank you so much for checking this video out. I'm Dave Wilson. Today, I'm hanging out with my homie, Andrea, and she's going to be sharing her testimony of just being really saved by Christ out of the New Age movement and just some crazy, like, demonic things going on there. I think you guys are really going to be blessed by her testimony. But Andrea, welcome. It is good to be hanging out with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for taking this time to be with me and let me share my testimony in this way. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I guess if you want to go ahead and just kind of get started, just kind of share, kind of where you were at, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Okay. Well, let's see. I was raised Catholic, and I remember at a very young age praying to God and actually having a relationship with him. But as I got older, as I got into my teens, I was constantly asking more of those existential questions of why are we here and who really is God? And I wasn't really in the Word at that point. And I just was finding that I knew I was speaking to God, but I was struggling with the idea of having to go sit in front of a priest, confess my sins to him. And I just felt like a lot of questions that I had weren't being satisfied through the Catholic faith. And so in my teens, I renounced the faith. I was supposed to get confirmed, and I just shared with my parents that that was not the route that I wanted to go. And so I was kind of just left. And the one thing my parents always had said to me was just have a relationship with God. That is one thing that they really encouraged. Well, in my teens, going into my early 20s, having a relationship with God can mean a lot of things.
Yeah.
And actually, it's kind of significant to mention this. When I was 18, I was very young, and I became a cheerleader for the Denver Broncos.
Really?
And that was in 2001, and I was very young. I was the youngest girl on the team. I think one of the youngest girls to ever be a Denver Bronco cheerleader. And I don't know that I was really prepared for all of that exposure. And the interesting thing about it is our very first game of the season in 2001 was September 10th, 2001, playing Monday night, playing the New York Giants. And I was on TV a lot that night. For some reason, the video camera just kept coming to me I have no idea why. So that night and that morning, I'm getting texts from all my friends and Andrea, we saw you on TV. And I was just kind of in this bubble. And I was also on this high of, wow, I was on national television because it was a Monday night football game. And then it wasn't moments later that I get the call from my mom to turn the TV on, and September 11th was happening. And wow. I just remember going from this super high to trauma. I guess that's the best word I had. Just trauma. I couldn't leave my house. I dealt with some very severe fear for months after September 11th. And that led into me, because I was in college at this point. So I started doing really poorly in my classes. I didn't want to be in school. I was scared to be downtown. And I was still cheerleading, but I started getting into all of those questions of why are we here? What are we doing here? Who am I? And again, I'm in this sort of superficial reality, and nothing was being satisfied. My questions were just not, I couldn't find that fulfillment that I was looking for. So I just took a turn for the worst. I dropped out of school. I stopped cheerleading. I started drinking a lot. I got into some sexual sin. I will say lots of sexual sin. And I was just like, I was yearning and I was chasing everything outside of me. I was chasing the world. I was chasing fulfillment through man. I was trying to fill that fulfillment through, or fill that hole, I guess, through men and through attention from men, and just really wanting love, wanting to be loved, wanting to be accepted. And a lot of that, I think I think I thought that I had to give my body away in order to have that love and acceptance that I was looking for. Yeah. So after a few years of going through that, I did have a morning where I woke up and realized I was in a very deep depression. But I woke up one morning and I just decided, okay, I am done with the drinking. I mean, not that I stopped drinking, but I just knew that I had to make a change. So I started getting into, I went to the doctor, and the doctor diagnosed me with depression, and he prescribed me some antidepressants. And for some reason, I took them for a few weeks, and whatever it was, I was just like, I want to go the natural route with this. So I started getting into holistic health. And holistic health is, as we know, infiltrated with Eastern religious thoughts and practices. So I started getting into, just like natural, just herbs and essential oils. And then that led into, before I knew it, I was in yoga, and then I was meditating. And then I started getting into the ideas of healing myself and energy healing within myself. And it got pretty deep to where then I was vegan, and I'm trying to just think what I was doing at this point. I was reading a lot of like self-help books. I started leading women's groups, just through these books, through these self-help books, and teaching about meditation and yoga and self-love and loving ourselves. And that was sort of my way of, I guess, letting go of needing all that love and attention from men, and then saying, okay, I just need to love myself. Right. This is the key. This is the answer. Well, like I said, I was vegan. I was meditating every day. I was doing yoga every day. And there was one day where I literally, I don't know how else to describe it, but I blinked my eyes and I opened my eyes. It was just like any other day. And all of a sudden I kept describing it like, I feel like I'm on another dimension. Okay. I was in the same world I had been living in my whole life, driving down the same streets I drove down my whole life. But I felt like I was in an alternate reality. And
this was when you were meditating, this happened?
I wasn't even meditating. Okay. I wasn't even in meditation. I just remember I blinked my eyes and I opened my eyes, and all of a sudden I was in this whole other reality. That's how it felt. Everything looked the same. Nothing looked different. But it was like I was in like a on the same planet, but a totally different planet. Okay. And then from that point, I started feeling like this, like fire heat energy moving up the base of my spine, from the base of my spine all the way up my back. And it was there was nothing I could do to control it. I went to bed that night and I described, because I didn't know what was happening to me. I kept describing it like, oh, I've pierced through the veil. It's like I've seen through the veil of this reality. And I remember I had to go meet my friends that night, and I felt like I was high. I felt like I was on drugs, and I hadn't done a single drug. And I went to bed that night. I would sleep, but again, for a few months, the way I would describe it is I'm sleeping, but I'm not sleeping. It's like I said, I felt like spirits or beings were inside of me and reworking my insides. That's how I described it. It was like I was sleeping, but all this activity was happening inside of me. And I was like, it's like these beings are taking pieces of me and reworking them and putting them together in new ways, like I'm being worked on. That's how I kept describing it. And this fire energy was getting more and more and more intense. And I was describing this to a friend that I worked with, and I had been telling him about it for months. And he came into work one day and he had this book on Kundalini, and he goes, Andrea, I think this is what's happening to you. I think this is it. And I didn't really read the book, but I read a few parts and I was like, this is it. This is exactly what's happened to me. And I was really proud of it. I thought it was so cool because from my understanding, people work to have their Kundalini activated, and they go to Kundalini yoga classes. And I was like, this just happened spontaneously. I didn't even have to try. I mean, granted, I was in yoga, I was meditating, I was vegan, I was seeking deeply inside of myself. And so I wouldn't necessarily say it was spontaneous, but I had no clue what Kundalini was at this point. So from that point, I met this guy who was facilitating transformational journeys all across the world. And I decided I wanted to go with him and a group of, I think, 10 other people to Bali on this 2-week transformational journey. So I went on that journey with him. I went to Bali. I was there for over 2 weeks. And I don't want to say too much about him because a lot of people know who I'm talking about. And I don't want to expose too much about what went on.
Under the bus too hard.
Yeah. But we'll just say it was not holy. And on any level, but I will say that, and I'm not saying that he is intentionally wanting, or I really believe he believes he's helping people. I felt like I had found the key to healing at this point because during these seminars, I was witnessing miracles. Miracles. And when I was in Bali, though.
Any miracles that stand out?
Just seeing demons leave people, like seeing him doing certain energy work and witnessing demons or spirits leaving people.
Okay.
And manifestations of those spirits leaving.
So you're talking seeing the physical, almost like an embodiment of these spirits?
Yes, and seeing them actually leave, through vomiting, and you would actually see their appearance completely changing. It wasn't just you saw them before and you saw them after, and they looked
just a different person.
Yeah, they look different.
Okay. Wow.
So, and then other things too, from my understanding of Kundalini, I would say Kundalini being activated in people just right before our eyes, uncontrollable laughter, just uncontrollable body shakes, things like that. But it's so interesting how Satan truly does disguise himself as an angel of light, because you're just watching and it looks wondrous. It's like, this is not human. Like, it's otherworldly is the way I used to describe it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I will say, though, when I was in Bali, and this is where I don't know how to make sense of all of this, but I believe Jesus was with me, because the whole time I was in Bali, I kept talking. I kept seeing him, not like his physical appearance, but I would close my eyes and again, it's not like I was seeing how we typically think of Jesus, but I knew it was him. Like, I knew he was there, and I kept talking about this man, but I couldn't say his name. I knew it was Jesus, but I could not say that it was him, because I didn't have the Holy Spirit. But I kept talking about him. I drew him. I wrote about him. I was dreaming about him, but I could not say that it was Jesus. And I was too proud anyway to even say that it was Jesus. It was just like some man.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. So I do believe somehow I think he was there with me. I don't, again, it's something I don't know how to make sense of, because obviously I was not saved.
Right.
So then I ended up working for this guy. After Bali, I moved to Los Angeles, and I worked for him for a couple of years. So I began, I saw more and more of, I saw spirits, like angelic beings in the room. I just saw more and more people just releasing spirits. I don't even know how else to describe them. Like, I would see these sort of angelic looking beings coming out of this facilitator, and they would just like move through the room. And I couldn't ever see these things except when I was in a room with him. So it was all.
Was it something that like followed you home, or you would just see like out like at a restaurant somewhere or something?
Yeah, it was only when I was in these seminar experiences. So there was also a lot going on there, as far as me thinking that I had this like amazing connection with this guy. And just having like a very deep, I guess you could call it, soul tie with him. I had feelings for him. I just felt very attached to him. So then I worked for him for a couple of years, but it got very overwhelming for me, because I was having those feelings for him on top of all of these spiritual experiences I was having. On top of that, I was just completely broken. I mean, just no strength, I just felt like I was witnessing all of these healings, all of these amazing things happening. But my darkness was getting heavier. The darkness around me was getting heavier. But I left working for him, and then I decided I would start my own practice. So I had kind of been witnessing him do his healing techniques, and I think in some way I was mirroring what I was picking up from watching him for a couple years. So I started my own practice, and I didn't.
So now your practice, was that just like I guess kind of like the purpose of that was just for spiritual healing? Was that mainly what it was?
Spiritual healing, exactly.
Okay.
That's what I thought I was doing. I thought I was a healer. I thought I had gifts for healing.
Okay.
So it actually started, the reason I started it to begin with was because of people contacting me. I was on Facebook, and so I was sharing a lot on Facebook. And people started contacting me, asking me for advice. Well, eventually it was like, I can't be spending all this time doing all this work for free. So I started charging for my time is what happened. But I didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew that I was going to get on, Skype or whatever, meet in person with people and sit with them and talk to them and just see where it goes. Well, I remember my very first session with someone. We sat there the sessions were about an hour, and we just sat there staring at each other for an hour. And hardly any words being said. I mean, I maybe said a few words. I had him close his eyes. It was a guy, and led him through this short meditation that, I don't know, all of it just, it's hard to talk about because it's just sad. It's really sad. So anyway, I met with him, and I remember as I was in this session with him, that energy that was going up my spine was now up into my neck, and my neck would just lock. Like I couldn't move my neck, and it would just lock. And all of a sudden I would start feeling these different sensations in my body. And I didn't know what they were, but then I started noticing this was happening session after session. So I finally started testing these sensations that I was feeling. So, for example, my arms would burn up. They would get really hot. And I wouldn't say anything about what I was feeling, but I would ask the person, what are you feeling right now? And they would tell me, well, my arms are burning up right now.
So this is always during a session?
Yeah, this is always
feel
during
these?
a
Okay.
session. Yeah. Uh-huh. And so I was like, whoa, my arms are burning right now. So I started picking, and I would do it in my next session. I would feel pain in my stomach, and I'd ask, okay, what are you feeling right now? And they would tell me, oh, I have a pain in my stomach or my shoulder. I mean, after one, after another, and I never told people ever that it was like this energy would come up to my neck would lock. It would just and then all of a sudden I could feel what they were feeling in their body. I think there's a word for that. I don't remember what it's called.
Okay. Wow.
So I started asking, so then what I would do, I knew I could feel what they were feeling. So then I would just start leading them into meditations, or I would just start kind of directing attention into those areas. Like if they had pain in their neck or their shoulder or their stomach or, the arms, it was always very just spontaneous on the spot. I never had anything planned in my sessions, but I would just start bringing attention to those areas. Well, then as I started doing that, and it's most of the people I worked with were men. That was another really interesting thing. So as I started guiding them into that, whatever area of their body, they would start confessing. I didn't use that word confessing, but they would start opening up to me about things that they had been hiding for 10 years. They would start talking to me about pornography addictions, prostitution, prescription drug addictions, food addictions, cutting.
Wow.
They just would start opening up and sharing.
Things that men don't usually open up and talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not laughing, it's just, so they would open up and they would share these things with me, and I would listen, and then we would meet again. And what was starting to happen is every time I met with them, we would talk about these. It was mostly addictions. That's what, for some reason, and there were women I worked with too that had addictions, but it was mostly men. Like, this is one example. One woman, she had been cutting herself for like 5 years. She's told me that she had been going to, I don't know how many counselors, and she just could not stop cutting herself. So we had met, we went through kind of this whole healing scenario or whatever we were doing. I can't even really explain in detail what was going on because it doesn't really matter. But we would meet again, and I would ask, okay, so how maybe it was a couple weeks later, and I asked her, how's that going? How's it, have you been cutting yourself? Where, just kind of asking her where she's at with that. And she was just like, oh my gosh, I haven't cut myself since the last time we met. And she didn't even realize, and this is what I was noticing was happening. They would just kind of stop. Like, they would open up, confess something to me. We would do some kind of meditation healing thing, and then we'd meet again, so a few more times. But sometimes by the next session, it was like they had just completely stopped.
So you were like legitimately helping people, like people are coming to you with these issues and they're going away.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but of course, there's so much just sin and just Satan working through all of this as well, obviously, because they were coming to me, looking to me in a way for healing. I was in no way guiding them to the Lord. Right. I was in no way bringing glory to the Lord. And we know that Satan, as I'm sharing these things, I want to make it very clear. It sounds like healing was happening. And you know what? I don't know. Maybe some kind of deliverance really was going on in these sessions, but their souls were not being saved in any way. So maybe they really were breaking free from these addictions. And actually, I was curious because I haven't looked back. I went and looked back at some of my clients just to see where they're at. It's really hard to tell. I don't really know. But from what I could see, it seems like a lot of them are just kind of just living these sort of happy lives. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really in communication to know for sure, but.
Well, and it's crazy too. Like, I mean, for the kind of what you were saying in terms of like, they're looking to the wrong thing for their source of healing or whatever. And it's almost like it was the same thing with you, when you first kind of got caught up in this stuff. It's like you look and you get some sort of a sign that says like, I'm on the right track. Yeah. Like you had that experience and then you're seeing these, kind of like these mystical spiritual things. And it's like, that's confirming to you that you're looking in the right place. And then, kind of same thing with these people, they're looking to the wrong place for something. And it's like, when that's where your heart is, you're looking for these answers in these things, absolutely. Spiritual forces are going to confirm those things, because their goal is to, they don't care if they're, looking at like, demonic entities, they don't necessarily care, I don't think, about like whether or not they actually end up possessing you or get you to, murder somebody or whatever. It's like, they're just as content to have you, trusting in something other than Christ. It's like one is almost as good as the other.
Exactly.
So yeah, it is interesting to see just what it is that people are trusting in there and what things give them sort of that confirmation that they're on the right track when they're not.
So true. And Satan will be right there to confirm for you. If you're looking for that sign in anything other than Christ, Satan will be so glad to confirm that look this way, look at this shiny, glamorous thing.
You're good to go.
Yeah.
Good to go just the way you are. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I went through a couple years of that. Lots and lots of stuff happened in those couple years. But for time's sake, towards the end of, well, what was starting to happen was my practice was starting to just implode on itself. I was dealing with, so, okay, through all of this, something I forgot to mention, I'm dealing with severe spiritual attacks. Every night going to bed and hearing Satan. I never called him Satan. I knew it was Satan. I just called him the darkness. And he would torment me every night. Try and convince me that I should be dead, I should die, I should kill myself, that I'm worthless, that I'm only a burden to the world. I mean, there weren't many nights that I wasn't going to bed bawling my eyes out and actually begging Satan to just take my soul.
Wow.
And not in a worshiping way, like it was like, just have your way with me, Satan. I mean, I talked to him every night for 2 years.
Wow. Now, are you talking, okay, so I guess there's a lot going on there. Are you talking, like, was that like a physical voice that you would hear, or was it just things that you would kind of hear like in your head, sort of, or how did that work?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then in terms of like his tormenting, was that something like, are you talking like sleep paralysis where you're being attacked, or this is all before you even fall asleep?
Well, I started getting sleep paralysis from a really young age. So yeah, but then when I got into New Age, I started getting it a lot more. And then the attacks it's so hard to describe things that are in the spirit because nothing physically was happening to me. So that was very confusing for people because they would look at me and they would see this girl that is, has this practice and she's helping people and she appears happy. I wasn't trying to be fake at all. Like I wasn't trying to have this appearance of being happy, but I think I just came off as just looking pretty normal. Mm-hmm. But when I would describe these attacks to them, it didn't make sense. Because I didn't really have like physical manifestations of these attacks. It was spiritual. It was like,
it wasn't like you woke up and you had like a slash on your back or something like some people, do get with spiritual attacks. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just spiritual oppression. It was heavy. And I felt like it just came with me everywhere I went.
Wow. Okay. And this was something that just started, you said, when you got into, especially the practice is when it got way, way worse, but this was something that was constant. Like this was a daily thing.
Oh yeah. It was daily. I was constantly battling. Yeah. And then one day, maybe about it was about a year and a half before I was saved. I was on the beach and I did hear Jesus's voice, and it wasn't audible, but it was like, I knew his voice, and he said, it's time to come home. And this was a year and a half before I was saved. And I knew it was Jesus. I knew Jesus was calling me home, but I was, of course, a stubborn child. And I heard his voice. But from that point of hearing his voice, I actually became more angry for about a year and a half until I was saved. I mean, very angry at God and I had journals that I had to burn. I mean, I was so mad at him. I didn't understand how this God, because then all of a sudden I accepted that I was created. God created me. And I didn't understand why this God would create me. If I was just this horrible being and I was worthless, all these things that Satan was telling me, why would God even put me through this? Why even, kind of like Job, why even let me exist. I didn't want to exist. And I was mad that he created me because I felt like a burden to the world. I felt like I was just in people's way. And I did not, so I didn't want to exist. So it was kind of funny going back and looking at my journals because I was so angry at God, but I was mostly talking to Satan. Like, I was angry at God, but then I was telling Satan to have his way with me. Like, I was giving Satan way more power than God.
Okay.
But then there were these little whispers like, but Jesus, if you are real, I want to know, like, show me you're real. I want to see evidence of that you're real. So back to my practice, I'm going through my practice. I'm seeing people, breaking free from like decades long addictions and finding joy in their lives and all these things. But again, my darkness was getting heavier and I couldn't bear anymore. I mean, I could barely sit in sessions. But the interesting thing was, like, a month or two before I was saved, because I had nothing left in me, I started asking my clients, and I remember this, do you know who Jesus is? And I didn't know Jesus at this. I just started asking them, do you know Jesus? And some would say, well, I grew up Christian or whatever. And I'd say, well, you should just pray to him. Because I was seriously like, I have nothing to give. And I didn't really want to be doing it anymore. And not only that, but God was just taking clients away from me. And, but I was asking them, I was telling them, pray to him, pray to Jesus, go to Jesus, take this to, and I was telling them,
Wow.
take all of this to Jesus. But then I would hang up and I just go on my way, so, so this is also significant. A couple months before I was saved, I had a friend that was a Christian. And she had stuck by me for a couple years. I do not know how. I have to admit, I could not be friends with me now. It would be really hard to be as close, like her being a believer and me being so far away from him. I don't know how she stuck by me, except that she would tell you that Jesus asked her to, that Christ was calling her to pray for me, for her church to pray for me. And I didn't know this, but she said that she would look at me and she'd go, I don't know how he's going to do this. She was like, I didn't know if I would ever see it, but God just told me to keep praying for you. So then a couple months before I was saved, I called her and I said, Brittany, I want to read the Bible. And she said, and I didn't know this at the time either, but she tells me now, she was on the other line and she said her jaw dropped. She was just like, and she was getting her master's at this point, full-time job. She's all of the stuff she does with her church. She's also there thinking, how am I going to do a Bible? I told her I wanted to do a Bible study. And she's like, how am I going to fit a Bible study into all this? And she said, God was like, you find the way, you get to that Bible study every week.
That's
so
awesome.
We started reading, but none of it made sense. I mean, it was just like foreign language. I had absolutely no connection to it. It was just like dead words to me. I did not know what I was reading. And I was trying to spiritualize it, of course. So like any hole I could find, or not hole, because there are no holes, but like any excuse I could find to turn it into something mystical, I would. Mm-hmm. Okay, to the night I was saved. So I was reading the Bible. It was not making any sense to me. I was only reading the small passages that we had to every week, and we'd meet every week. I couldn't pray. I couldn't really engage in the conversation, but for some reason I was still reading what I could, even though it meant nothing to me at that point. So it was another night, like any other night for me, dealing with those same attacks, except this time I knew that Jesus was standing there. And I was in my bed, and suddenly it was like I was, battling with the devil. And then all of a sudden it was like, Jesus is here. Jesus is standing in my room. And I knew he was there. And I fell out of my bed on my knees. And all of a sudden I knew all of my sin. I mean, it was just like Holy Spirit dropped me to my knees, and I started confessing all of my sin. I mean, I felt like I was kneeling at his feet, literally. Like, I mean, he was right there. And I just started confessing my sin to him. And I knew my sin. I mean, that was the significant thing for me, was how I just knew my sin all of a sudden. And I started telling him that my life was his, that my heart was his, that I just was like, my whole being, everything, this is all yours. And I was bawling. I mean, I don't know how long I was at his feet, a couple hours at least. And I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and I knew that darkness was lifting. I mean, I knew. I didn't have the language yet. It still didn't click with me, but I was like, all of a sudden I had this love for Jesus I'd never had before. I knew he was my savior. I knew he was my Lord. And I met up with some friends that day, and I was just telling them about Jesus, and they were just like, wanted nothing to do with it. But I was like, no, just sharing with them. But it actually took a couple days before. I mean, it was a couple days before it clicked, where I was like, I'm saved. I'm a Christian. Because for some reason, I didn't have the language.
Yeah.
And
the Christian means,
yes, exactly. And I actually remember getting on Google or YouTube or something and being like, and typing in, how do you know you're saved? What does it mean? How do you know? And so I was watching these videos, and I was like, oh my gosh, I am a Christian. And so that's what happened. Yeah. I was saved in my bedroom.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So
in the Bible study you're doing with your friend, was it something where she was, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of back feed, I think.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay. All right. I think it's gone now. So in the Bible study you were doing with your friend, was it something where she was like presenting the gospel specifically? Or was it just kind of like some key passages here and there? Like, did you have any understanding of how we would articulate the gospel at that point?
No. And that's kind of, I thought about that recently. We were reading, we were doing one of those like 1 year Bible plans, where you read part in the Old Testament, a Psalm, a proverb, and a small portion of the New Testament. So we were doing one reading a week. So I would read, paragraph of Genesis, a Psalm, a proverb, and a paragraph in Matthew or something. I wasn't actually, I can't say I was actually hearing the gospel.
Okay.
I mean, I was reading in the New Testament, but I don't know that the gospel was actually being preached to me.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. But I mean, that's so cool. Like, it's God's, he's the potter. He can save you how he's going to save you. And, that's just awesome to just pull you up like that. That's amazing.
And she may have been, I'm sure. I mean, I know all those years she told me of her testimony.
Okay.
She constantly was telling me of her love of the Lord and how he saved her from her drug addictions. And I'm over here like, I see people being saved from their addictions every day, or not saved, but delivered from those.
Sure.
It didn't really mean that much to me. It's like, well, that's cool. We all have our ways to God. So you found yours, sounds like a cool guy, but
Right.
I found mine.
Right.
And
You found your path. You got yours. Yeah.
yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so let me ask you this: when you were sort of in the pinnacle of like just your darkness, who was Jesus to you, or was it something that you didn't even think about?
I don't think I thought too much about him. I will say, I was around a lot of people who I think quite literally thought they were Jesus. And I also was around this idea that we are all the second coming of Jesus, Christ consciousness, that we, multiple thousands of people, were the second coming of Jesus. And I will say that I never gravitated. I think there was a part of me that was like, I don't know how, if this was possible, but there was this respect, I could say. Like I was scared to touch a lot of those ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I would listen to them, but I had this fear of really taking them on.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah,
But as
and
far
that
as
seems super common with just people with that. I mean, really, people of any background, like Jesus is the one guy that you have to do something with. You know what I mean? Like Christians don't really have to do anything with like Muhammad or Buddha or anybody like that. But it's like everybody from every religion, every worldview, you're always doing something with Jesus. You have to put him in some sort of a box, or you have to explain him away somehow.
Yes. And actually, that's something that was really highlighted to me over the last couple months, because I go back and I look at different communities of people that I used to hang out with, and I saw it so clearly. Everything they're doing is to disprove Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they're saying it literally or directly, in some way, it's like everything they're doing is to prove that they don't need him. And I was doing the same thing. I'm not pointing finger. I mean, I was doing the exact same thing. So, but it's all to prove to ourselves that I don't need a savior, that I can save myself.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, just giving you
right.
assurance and anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so you were saved then. Now, was there still a significant battle to sort of get rid of that darkness from being saved, or was it a pretty like cut and dry kind of thing, or how did that go?
I mean, I was full on from the day I was saved. So for 2 weeks, and I know a lot of people have, I'm hesitant to say this, but for 2 weeks, I heard Jesus's voice like he was right next to me, telling me to burn. So, okay. I felt like he was telling me, he was telling me every step of my day for 2 weeks. I don't know why for 2 weeks. I don't hear him like this now. I have had moments of it, but for 2 weeks, it was like, burn these books, shatter these statues. I mean, I had so many statues from Bali. I had scarves and all kinds of adornments and things that were blessed and touched with like shamans and all kinds of things, and my books. And so I later saw like Stephen Bancars, he did a whole video on burning these things. And I never saw that video. I mean, God was like, I knew exactly, I went through every single item that I owned, and I knew exactly what to do with it because God was with me, and I knew that I had to get rid of these things. So there was one night it had been like, I was tired because I had a lot to do. I had not only that, but I had like financial arrangements and things, like I had to call. God was telling me, this person owes you money. You need to call them and tell them they don't owe you money anymore. Like, you need to cancel these agreements. You owe this company money. You owe money here. You need to call these. I mean, I just knew exactly what I needed to do. Things that I was terrified of doing for years. I just knew God was with me and walking with me, and that I can confront a lot of things that I had been avoiding for years. And so I was, I was getting rid of things, burning things. I mean, I had this huge bonfire. And then one night I went to bed, and I hadn't been dealing with those spiritual attacks since I was saved. But this was a couple weeks later, and all of a sudden I knew I was being attacked, and I freaked out for a second. And I was like, oh my gosh, I started questioning my salvation. I was like, maybe I wasn't saved. I was going through that process in my mind. And then all of a sudden I started seeing this drawer and in my room, and it's like 2:00 in the morning. And I'm thinking, this drawer is empty. Why? I've been through every item in my home. That drawer, there's nothing in that drawer. What could possibly be in that drawer? And the only thing I could think of that was in there was, I had my passport in there, my birth certificate. I'm like, I can't burn those things. So, but I'm dealing with these attacks, and I kept seeing this drawer. So I was trying to get myself just to go to sleep. I was praying. They weren't going away. Finally, I was like, okay, I'm getting up. I'm going to go see what's in that drawer. I went and opened the drawer. I pulled the envelope out, and I'm looking through the envelope, and I'm seeing my passport, my birth certificate, all these kinds of things. And then all of a sudden I get to the back, and there's a certificate from when I was I got attuned in Reiki when I was in the New Age.
Yeah.
And I pulled that certificate out, and I burned it, and I said a prayer, and the attack stopped. I mean, so that's how it was for 2 weeks. But then after 2 weeks, since then, I'm not necessarily hearing him like that. I'm hearing him through the word. That's where my relationship is being built with him. I don't know why I had those 2 weeks. And the reason why I say I'm hesitant to say that, because I know a lot of people think that if you hear his voice, or, God doesn't talk to us like that anymore, that maybe it's other spirits. But this was not other spirit. I mean, this was the Lord. And it was absolutely the Lord. And then, since then I've just been guided to just be in his word, and to have really sound, just grounded doctrine, and to not get into any kind of like spiritual experiences, or not seeking that stuff. Like, I'm actually very, very sensitive to all of that. And that has also, I think, coming from New Age has been a blessing in a certain way, because now I see how a lot of New Age has made its way into the church. Like, I remember the first couple weeks being saved, going to a mega church in my area, and just sitting there and thinking, am I at a self-development talk right now? It reminded me so much of when I was in the New Age.
And a lot of that too, like a lot of the, I think, ways that people get involved in New Age is through like, the self-help books and stuff like that. But it's like a lot of like pop Christianity is right there with it too, where, its focus is on, here's how to be a better you, and, add a little Jesus here, and, do this stuff. But it's like, it's almost like there's that bubble of where New Age and things that call itself Christian is sort of looks very much the same.
And it was almost worse because they were using his name, and it really bothered me. So that was one thing coming from New Age, I did God did give me discernment in a way that helps me to see a lot of this that has come into the church. And it's very hard to see the deception in the church in this way. So yeah. But
Definitely. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's such a cool testimony. Anything else that you want to add, or any maybe any words of advice to anybody who's kind of in there right now, where they're in the, in deep in the new age, and they have this darkness? Like, what would you say to you, when you were in the pinnacle of that?
well, I would say if anyone has even made it, if you're not a believer and you've even made it this far in this video to watch all of this, I'm speaking to that person, because if you're currently involved in New Age and you can sit through this, and I would say that the Lord is likely calling you, and it may not make sense. None of it may make sense right now. And the thing is that you don't have to make sense of it. And I would trust that. And I would go to your local Christian bookstore and buy a Bible. Because I did do that. I bought a Bible when I started the Bible study, and just open it and read it. And even if it doesn't make sense to you right now, just keep reading and keep praying. And the other thing I would say is pray directly to Jesus and renounce all other spirits. And that's something else that I did too. A few months before I was saved as well, I actually stopped talking. I wasn't necessarily praying directly to Jesus yet, but I was definitely not, like, I didn't want to have anything to do with spiritual beings. And actually, maybe I did. I'm now that I'm thinking about it, maybe a couple weeks before I was saved, maybe I was just only talking to Jesus. And so I would say to that person, just go to Jesus, just talk to him, go directly to him, and tell anything else that is trying to get in your way of speaking to him to just go away, and just keep your eyes focused on him and pray to him and open the word. And as you're reading the word, pray and pray and pray, and pray that your ears would be open, your eyes would be open to see the truth in the word. Because that day I was saved, the next morning when I opened the Bible, it was alive. It was living. It was breathing. It was like everything that I had been searching for my whole life was right there. And I was amazed. And I mean, I thought that all of that stuff in New Age was like supernatural and really cool. But when the word is illuminated to you, and you receive the Holy Spirit and you open that Bible, there is just nothing. I mean, it's just 100% divine intervention. There's nothing else. And so that would be my advice to that person.
That's awesome. Praise God. Praise God. And then just to kind of caveat too, in terms of like seeking the experience, seeking supernatural experience with Jesus, look to the word. Look to the word. Like if Jesus is going to come and highlight something to you or do something like that, praise God, that's amazing. But ultimately, we're not seeking, that experience necessarily. Right. The experience may happen. Jesus may come and do that. That's amazing. That 2 weeks you're talking where Jesus is just lighting you up with stuff here and there, for that may or may not happen.
No,
for
right.
you, but it's something that Jesus is he's gonna sovereignly come in there and do that. That's not, seeking experience or anything like that.
You can't seek the experience. I mean, we can't make that happen. Only God can save.
Yeah.
But if you're here and you're still listening to this, just open the word, just open the Bible, and don't seek the experience of it. And I share that with even new believers too, because even as believers, I think it's, especially coming from New Age, I think it's really easy to still want to seek those experiences. And what are my gifts? And do I have this gift? And I got that gift. And it's like, put all of that, nothing matters except keeping your eyes on the Lord and keeping your eyes on his word, and let him do the work. He's the one. We are not the ones.
Amen.
He is the one. So yeah, don't, absolutely, seeking spiritual experiences does not bring salvation.
Yep.
I think my testimony may come off that way, but that's not what I would encourage.
Awesome. Well, hey, this has been amazing. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Andrea, thank you so much for doing this. This has been super cool. I'm glad I got to do this. This has definitely been a blessing. And thank you guys for watching this. Please like, share, subscribe. Yeah, share this video around. This video is amazing. People need to hear this, this testimony, and just seeing the amazing things that that God has done in Andrea's life. That's awesome. All right. Well, hey, thank you again, Andrea. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys all have an amazing rest of the day, and Soli Deo Gloria.